So I'm a guy that's had a love-hate relationship with self-discipline all my life. And in some areas, I've been almost bizarrely self-disciplined, but in most areas, let me just tell you, I am not Jocko Willink. Maybe I wish I was. That guy is a man, but I'm not that. But nevertheless, I have had some priorities, some overarching priorities since I was a teenager that have sort of bridled and focused and helped me establish some behaviors that have kept me out of trouble, have enabled me to have a family life that has been incredibly rewarding, has surrounded me with a lot of friends, and has made a living, or at least close enough to having made a living that I've been able to take care of the other priorities that I just mentioned. So as I think back over my life, I think the times that I have practiced the most self-discipline was when I was an employee, had a steady job with a start time and a finish time, and people that I worked with, that I worked for, that I reported to on a specific job assignment. That coincided with being a younger man, sort of in pursuit of some education, but I knew it had to be education that I got for myself, so I spent a lot of time reading. I would get up early, I would stay up late, I would read scripture, and I would read any number of things that felt like formal discourse so that I could become familiar with the way that people thought and spoke who really knew how to think and speak. And so there was probably maybe 15 years where I was consistent in the time I got up, the time I went to bed, and what I did in between those times to move myself and my family forward. I have noticed that the times that I have been less disciplined in those ways were the times when in self-employment I was overwhelmed with work. I had too many jobs going or too much work pressure or pressure with responsibilities in other areas of my life that would tend to fracture me. And so I felt less focused and effective. But the things that I mentioned earlier about the promises that I had made to the people around me and to God always provided a framework for my habits that I think kept moving me towards some of the weightier goals that maybe I hadn't even articulated to myself earlier. Now, financial goals, anybody who's awake at all has read and heard all of the imperatives about set manageable, attainable goals and monitor your progress. Yes. What I ran into is that life happens and reversals happen and bad judgment has consequences and people will let you down and promises that other people make or business ventures that they agree to or economic downturns and the cyclical nature of economies can completely obviate some of the progress you've made towards your intermediate goals. And it can kind of put a sour taste in your mouth about setting goals that turn out to be unattainable in spite of everything you do. But so what, right? That kind of gets to my love-hate relationship with discipline, because there's no denying that a disciplined life has less chaos. And by discipline, mostly what I mean is delayed gratification. Kelly and I started drumming that into our children from the time that they began to speak English. That just because I have an impulse as a 60-year-old man or as a 6-year-old boy, just because I have an impulse does not mean that I have to act on that impulse. That's delayed gratification. Thankfully, my parents taught me that. Now, part of that was because my parents' range of options was so small because of their poverty that they couldn't extend a whole lot of options to their children because of what they were worried about in their own area of responsibility. But wherever it comes from, whatever drives it, there's almost nothing more important than teaching your children and yourself to wait to have the thing you want, in order that when you have the thing you want, it's going to be something much more important than if you take the thing you want now, which makes the thing you really want impossible later. Now, in the love-hate conversation around self-discipline, we need to understand that self-discipline is not simply willpower. It's not simply grit. It's not simply being as tough as Jocko Willink. That guy is tough both in terms of his willpower and his grit and his strength and his capacity and his determination. But I don't think that Jocko's self-discipline is willpower all the time. I think that Jocko has established habits. He doesn't have to make every decision fresh every day because a habit has been put in place. And when we establish these healthy habits, it frees up bandwidth. We don't have to make that decision because the habit initiates the behavior that moves us forward towards our goals. This is part of the strength and the magic of habit as part of self-discipline, establishing the right habits. As simple as I have a habit of buying Lager double front dungarees, of buying mock toe lace-up tan colored work boots, now Thorogood. The dungarees are now Key. And you see that I always wear a khaki shirt and a black quarter zip pullover. Those are habits because I don't have to think about that. I know what I'm putting on in the morning. And I know that when I get up, I read, I pray, I eat, I go to work. Now, work now includes spending an inordinate amount of time on my telephone and on a computer, and then getting out to the shop or to the job. But those habits are in place. The habits that come and go are whether or not I remember to exercise in the morning, whether or not I remember to stretch my back. Those kinds of things are regretfully kind of negotiable, but they do me good when I do them. Discipline is like that. If we can fall in love with the habits that we know are going to move us forward, we are going to love the life that manifests itself when we live with those habits. Now, some of this is not habit, and it's not willpower, and it's not self-discipline. It's just creating flow and a rhythm in your life that works. And it's pretty easy to tell in a private, focused moment whether or not we have flow and whether or not we have rhythm in our life. And if you have any question about that, if what you see as rhythm is actually chaos, talk to somebody that you can trust and say, hey man, do I look fractured all the time or just part of the time? Because if the flow that you've established with the habits that are part of your life are really working, and not just for you, but for the people around you, well, there's not much reason to change them. And on the other hand, it's important to keep track of the fact that rigid habit and rigid self-discipline is a cold, sterile, closeted way to be. There has to be space for spontaneity. There has to be space for responding to the opportunities or the demands, the people, the phone calls, the visitors, the accidents, the sickness, the people who come to you with an aching need that only you can address. There has to be room in your life, in spite of your habits, to be spontaneous and to bring to pass as much good as you can. And if your discipline makes it impossible for you to be what the people around you, including the people that suddenly appear around you, need, then your discipline has become entirely self-serving. And self-serving discipline will make you a person that nobody is going to mourn when they bury you. Okay, can we lock down on that? That some of the most disciplined people, some of the people who achieve and aggrandize the most, are never spoken of or thought of again when they're put into the ground. So, a love-hate relationship with discipline. Perhaps it's, like Paul said, be ye temperate in all things. Maybe self-awareness is the key. Maybe if we are not mature enough to be self-aware enough to know when either A, we've got to have more self-discipline, or B, our self-discipline is about to cost us all of our happiness, maybe the whole conversation is moot. So how about that? How about if the first habit is the habit of self-awareness? How is my behavior today impacting my life in the future? / how is my behavior today impacting my interaction with the people around me? I have a love-hate relationship with discipline. I probably need to err more on the side of more good habits. I don't know about you, but I have every confidence that you can figure it out. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.